France once ruled an empire that stretched across 4 continents. Soldiers, ships, and colonies carried its flag around the world. That empire collapsed. Yet today, in the clothes we admire, the food we celebrate, and even the language of luxury, France still shapes how the world sees taste and style. Welcome back to EraSpeak. Empires usually fall only once. France may have built 2, one through force, and another through something far quieter. France lost one empire, but did it quietly build another? Decades before Versailles was even a palace, France had already started shaping its own language on purpose. In 1635, a powerful minister named Cardinal Richelieu founded the Académie Française. Its job was to write an official dictionary and set clear rules for how French should be used. Prestige in France was never left to chance. In the late 1600s, a French king named Louis XIV transformed a royal hunting lodge into one of the grandest palaces on earth, Versailles. Louis called himself the Sun King. At Versailles, he turned royal power into a performance. Nobles from across France were expected to attend his court, follow his strict rules, and copy his fashion. Their clothing, their manners, even their daily routines revolved around him. Every morning, a small crowd of nobles gathered just to watch the king get dressed. Even helping the king get dressed was treated as a special honor. Foreign rulers took notice. Kings and princes across Europe began copying French style, French court rituals, and the French language. Speaking French well became a sign of wealth and status, far beyond France's own borders. At the very same time, French leaders had a very different goal in mind, one built far from any royal ballroom. French ships crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Settlers built a colony in North America they called New France. Traders and soldiers took islands in the Caribbean, where sugar plantations depended on enslaved labor. New trading posts opened in India as well. Versailles was not the true birthplace of French cultural power. It did not begin there. But it was the moment when 2 very different forces began to grow side by side. Force, armies, ships, and colonies. Prestige, language, fashion, art, and royal ritual. Both would shape how the world saw France for centuries to come. France's overseas empire did not grow all at once. It rose in 2 great waves, separated by crisis. The first French colonial empire stretched from Quebec in the north to Caribbean islands like Saint-Domingue. It also included trading posts in different parts of India. For over a century, it kept growing. Then, in the 7 Years' War, France suffered a major defeat against Britain. In 1763, France gave up Canada and most of its land east of the Mississippi River. France also lost its chance to challenge British power in India, although it kept a few small trading posts. Its remaining land west of the Mississippi, known as Louisiana, passed to Spain. France's first colonial empire was now badly weakened. While ships and soldiers built one kind of French power abroad, something very different was growing back home. In Paris, writers and thinkers gathered in fashionable salons to debate bold new ideas. Voltaire questioned the authority of the church. Rousseau wrote about liberty and the rights of ordinary people. Diderot helped create a huge encyclopedia, meant to organize all human knowledge in one place. These thinkers turned Paris into Europe's capital of new ideas. Educated people across the continent read French books, wrote letters in French, and debated French ideas late into the night. This created a strange, uncomfortable question, one France could not avoid forever. What happens when a country spreads both control over other people and the belief that all people deserve freedom? France ruled colonies built on forced labor. At the very same time, French thinkers were arguing that all men are born free and equal. Sooner or later, someone was going to notice the contradiction. Nowhere was that contradiction sharper than in Saint-Domingue, France's colony in the Caribbean. By the late 1700s, Saint-Domingue was the richest colony in the world. Its sugar and coffee plantations produced enormous fortunes for French planters. That wealth depended almost entirely on enslaved Africans, forced to work under brutal, often deadly conditions. In 1789, revolution broke out in France itself. Crowds stormed the Bastille prison in Paris. The new French government wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man, announcing that all men are born free and equal. News of that declaration reached Saint-Domingue. For enslaved people there, it raised a devastating question. If all men were truly born free and equal, why did France's richest colony depend on slavery? In 1791, a massive uprising began. It did not grow from imported ideas alone. It grew from years of brutal treatment and from African resistance traditions carried across the ocean. It also grew from deep divisions inside colonial society. Free people of color, poor white colonists, and wealthy planters all wanted different things. But France's own revolutionary words gave the rebels something powerful, a weapon made from France's own promises, turned back against France. A former enslaved man named Toussaint Louverture became one of the uprising's most skilled leaders. He built a disciplined army and fought French, British, and Spanish forces at different stages of the conflict. In 1800, Spain returned Louisiana to France. Napoleon hoped it would help him rebuild a French empire in the Caribbean. In 1802, he sent a large army to Saint-Domingue to crush the uprising and restore slavery. Toussaint resisted at first, but French forces captured him and sent him to a prison in France, where he died in 1803. The struggle did not end with him. Leaders including Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Henri Christophe, and Alexandre Pétion led the fight instead. Their forces, together with yellow fever and other diseases, destroyed Napoleon's campaign. Without Saint-Domingue, Louisiana no longer seemed worth defending. In 1803, Napoleon sold the entire territory to the young United States. With that one decision, France's first colonial empire in the Americas was almost entirely gone. In 1804, Dessalines and the other rebel leaders declared full independence. They named their new nation Haiti. It became the first country in the Americas to permanently abolish slavery and the first nation in modern history born from a successful uprising of enslaved people. Haiti shattered France's first colonial empire. But France would not give up on empire. Within a few decades, it would begin building a second one, larger than the first. France's second colonial empire grew mostly during the 1800s. French forces invaded Algeria in 1830. Over the following decades, France expanded across West and Central Africa, claiming territories that included modern Senegal, Mali, Ivory Coast, and Chad. It also took control of Indochina, including modern Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, plus islands spread across the Pacific. By the early 1900s, French territory stretched across 4 continents, ruling millions of people who had never chosen French rule. But even as this second empire reached its greatest size, another kind of French power was already spreading, without conquering a single piece of land. In 1883, a new organization called the Alliance Française began teaching French language and culture abroad. In Paris, fashion houses were building a new industry called haute couture, turning dressmaking into art. A young designer named Coco Chanel would soon become one of its most famous names. French filmmakers were among the first in the world to make movies. In 1900, a tire company published a small travel guidebook called the Michelin Guide. It would later become one of the world's most important guides to fine dining. Then, in the 20th century, the map began to collapse. In 1954, French forces suffered a huge defeat at Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam. France left Indochina soon after. That same year, an uprising began in Algeria, and it grew into a long, brutal war. In 1962, after 8 years of fighting, Algeria won its independence. Across those same decades, one African colony after another declared independence. One year stood out above the rest, 1960. When 17 African countries gained independence. 14 of them had previously been under French rule. Within less than a decade, France's second colonial empire had mostly vanished from the map. It would be easy to say that, as the territorial empire fell, France simply invented a cultural empire to replace it. But that is not quite true. France did not create its cultural influence out of nothing, in a sudden moment of crisis. It had been building that influence for decades, in some cases for over a century. That influence ran through the Alliance Française, through fashion houses, through French cinema, and through the Michelin Guide. French cinema followed the same pattern. In the late 1950s, directors such as Jean-Luc Godard and François Truffaut launched the French New Wave. Their films broke old rules and influenced filmmakers around the world. French cinema was gaining new power during the very same years that France was losing colonial control. As formal empire retreated, those older networks of language, art, fashion, and prestige became even more important. Losing colonies cost France real control over territory and government. But prestige, it turned out, did not require a flag, an army, or a colonial governor. If this story is making you rethink what an empire really is, hit like. And tell us in the comments, Can cultural influence be more powerful than control over territory? Today, French is spoken as an official or widely used language in countries across Africa, including Senegal, Mali, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, and Madagascar. The OIF brings together countries and governments connected by the French language. According to its latest report, roughly 2/3 of the world's French speakers now live in Africa. That is not simply a monument to French power. Many African nations kept French for practical reasons. In some countries, it served as a shared language between regions, with many different local languages. French also remained important in schools, government jobs, and international relations. These systems had developed during more than a century of colonial rule. It also helped keep trade ties open with France and with neighboring countries. French did not survive only because people loved it. It survived because people found ways to use it, adapt it, and eventually make it their own. Across Africa today, French exists in new forms, shaped by local accents, local words, and local writers, not just by Paris. France's presence in its former colonies has never fully ended either. France still holds overseas territories today, from the Caribbean to the Pacific. Its economic and political ties to former colonies remain strong, and many people still question them. Meanwhile, the cultural institutions built over the last century and a half continue to shape the world. Paris remains one of global fashion's most powerful capitals. French cooking techniques remain an important part of training for chefs around the world. The Michelin Guide still awards its famous stars to restaurants in cities that Louis XIV never even knew existed. Here is the real lesson behind two French empires. Military power can force people to obey, at least for a while. Cultural power works differently. It survives only when other people find it useful, admire it, or choose to reshape it into something of their own. France built an empire of soldiers. It also built an empire of language, fashion, and taste. People can inherit that second kind of empire, resist it, reshape it, and eventually claim it as entirely their own. France built two empires. One was drawn in soldiers, ships, and colonial borders. The other was written in language, fashion, food, and film. One largely disappeared from the map. The other lives on in language, taste, and institutions, and is still being rewritten today by people far beyond France's own borders. But there was one moment when France pushed military power to its greatest extreme, building one of the largest military empires Europe had seen in centuries. That story belongs to Napoleon. If you want to see how far one man pushed the empire of soldiers, watch our video on Napoleon next. Subscribe to EraSpeak for a new history story every 2 days. And keep learning English one empire at a time.